Hello, and welcome to the podcast version of the Week Air Review newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free at newsletter.theweekairreview.com. Subscribers get everything that I write instead of just the things that I think should be recorded, and also get them when they're written and not eventually. This is issue number 6. I don't want people to die, comma. Years ago, I worked with a man whose Twitter handle was something like the conservative kid, even though he was in his 30s. He was also deeply stupid, and not just because of his politics, though certainly as it related to them. I'm not a particularly effective debater, but he couldn't address even the most basic of his worldview's implications, like on interstate regulation. What should Louisiana residents do if Tennessee legalized dumping lethal chemicals into the Mississippi? Privatizing public safety. Do you think that letting poor people's houses burn will not affect rich people's houses? On the bathroom thing, which bathroom should this jacked bearded trans man use? Why? Who should enforce that? And how will that make anybody feel safer? I genuinely disagreed with him about everything that we ever discussed, with a single exception. And when he said, aha, we agree on something, I knew it wasn't him being a broken clock, it was me being wrong. But I didn't understand why capital punishment could never be right. And it is hard to let go of bad opinions if you don't understand why they're bad. Now, in practice, obviously it's bad because people are falsely convicted with horrifying frequency, and there is a 0% chance that no innocents have been executed, and the only way to stop that is to stop it. But this was around the time that a kid walked into a black church and opened fire, killing 9 people. And he seemed like precisely the type of person not worth spending tax dollars to keep alive, and possibly worth spending tax dollars to kill. Like, we might convict the wrong person in some scenarios, wasn't a good enough argument for me when there were unquestionably convicting the right person there. I knew I was wrong. But it took activist Brian Stevenson appearing on some podcast I probably stopped listening to a decade ago to make me understand that the moral argument against the death penalty is not about the crimes America stopped, but the ones it didn't. The United States lost its right to condemn someone to death the first time it abided a lynching, and it abided a whole lot of lynchings. And that was it, the thing that flipped the switch. As journalist Seymour Hersh says at the end of Cover Up, the latest project from Citizen4's Laura Poitras alongside Mark Obenhaus, we are a country of enormous violence. You can't have a country that does that and look the other way. These sort of debates ended when my colleague openly admitted that his feelings didn't care about facts, that his principles were paramount, and he fully rejected anything that didn't align with them. It was a wild thing to say, though clearly he was too dumb to understand the implications. I was never interested in him, so I never looked to see where he went. I kind of assumed that he started doing state-sponsored terrorism once the ICE billboards went up. It seemed perfect for a racist gym rat like him, and maybe he is and is hiding it, but he's advertising himself as an AI prompt specialist, so that's better. Renee Nicole Good is someone whose name I wish I never learned. It's bitterly ironic that the life of a woman whose prize-winning poem was titled On Learning to Dissect Fetal Pigs is now under the uniquely vicious microscope of the right-wing propaganda machine. From the moment that she was murdered by a state-sponsored terrorist, shot 3 times in the face at point-blank range, Good became uniquely dangerous to their project. Where the victims of these sorts of crimes are typically immigrants, or at least non-white, she was a natural blonde, a 37-year-old white suburban mother driving a car full of stuffed animals. The videos are horrible, and the photos are somehow worse. She is precisely the type of person who these racist policies and practices are ostensibly keeping safe, yet they killed her. And with no criminal record to hide behind, they complained about the pronouns in her bio, about her being a lesbian and a divorced one at that. They pointed to footage from the one angle that maybe makes it look like she's driving towards the terrorist who shot her, which would be irrelevant even if it were true, which every other angle makes very clear it was not, because it would still be in direct violation of their guidelines about the use of lethal force. Not that the terrorists cared, nor the government officials, news anchors, or influencers. Everyone went on the attack because this woman has to be Antifa or woke or whatever, because they cannot allow the fact that their supremacist society excludes 37-year-old white mothers, just as it does undocumented immigrants. We are a country of enormous violence, and I feel less safe than I did a week ago. And I wonder about the end of all this, if there will ever be one. At a bare minimum, every single person who made this happen, and ideally many of the people who allowed it to, would be rounded up and put on trial. But what would that really do? Jacob Geller's recent video essay, Fantasies of Nuremberg, looks at what really happened at and after those famous trials. And it turns out the answer is not very much. The Nazis who weren't executed were eventually set free because that's what happens with people in power. If America were a just society, the members of its high court would be given the kind of fair trial that they collectively don't believe the citizens deserve, but they won't be. And instead, they will be the final arbiters and continue to do the bidding of the fascists. So if there won't be trials, what then? What can be done? Like, I joke about bringing back the guillotines as much as anybody. And for a while, maybe that is what I wanted. But it really isn't anymore. We are a country of enormous violence, and I can't want more of it. I don't want the members of the Supreme Court who made the president a king to die. I don't want members of the cabinet to die. I don't even want the terrorist to die. But I want their influence to be gone. I want their power gone. Having rung in the new year with V for Vendetta, I'm thinking a lot about symbols recently. V donned a mask to become an idea that would live on well after his death. And the state-sponsored terrorists hide their faces too, but not for an idea. They do it because they're afraid of the fact that we know who killed Renee Nicole Good. Feels like men are afraid of being falsely accused of rape. Do you know what women are afraid of, sort of thing? I guess it's likely the case that Charlie Kirk's death was a net positive for society. The president lost an extremely effective propagandist, but that's not the only way that could have happened, or the best way. A thorough deplatforming would have served the purpose better, an utter diminishment of his ideas, because now he's a martyr whose name lives on. In his absence, we have to hear his widow complain about poor parenting in response to a question about her president's violent rhetoric on CBS News, an institution with a penchant for burying stories about prison conditions that make the U.S. government look bad. Like, the spiking of Inside CCOT was embarrassing and enraging, but 2 decades prior, they tried to bury the story of torture at Abu Ghraib at the request of that administration. As documented in Cover Up, Seymour Hersh told 60 Minutes that they could do their own story or they would become part of his. And the aired broadcast opens with an admission that is being done under duress, also embarrassing, also enraging. I don't want to know that guy's widow. I don't want to hear her or her weird ideas. I don't want to see any of these people's faces or hear their voices or even read their names. In my wildest fantasies, the headquarters of Fox News is not a cemetery, but a public library. I don't know how we get there, or even really believe that we can, but to wish for a cemetery, to fantasize about their deaths, means believing in some part of their political project. And the more that I've seen the ramifications of that project, the more names that I know that I wish I didn't, the less I can stand that idea. We should want our country to be better than what it is and always has been. There's no reason to mourn the loss of the terrorists and the fascists like we mourn their victims. But let's not work for their deaths. Let's work for their irrelevance.